Hey everybody, Peach here, and a full gem renovation is underway, and we have several mini projects to execute along the way. So today's project is installing pegboard. Alright, so here is the finished product. So let me show you how to do it. Starting with step number 1, measure the area that you want to cover with pegboard. So for me, that's 48 inches by 23 inches. All right, next step. Now we're going to cut the pegboard to size. And if you're going to be using a circular saw, cut with the white side, that's the front, facing downward. That will prevent the circ saw from scratching up that front surface. However, if you're going to be using a table saw like I'm gonna, cut with the white side facing up for that same reason. Also, if you want this to look a little nicer, I always recommend cutting only between a row of holes, okay? If you cut right on a row of holes, this thing is gonna look like a piece of paper that you ripped out of a spiral notebook. All right, let's cut. All right, next step. Now we're going to cut the spacer boards out of 1x2 lumber. And these spacer boards are necessary because we need a gap between the surface of the wall and the pegboard. And inside that gap, these hooks at the rear of all pegboard hardware, they'll be occupying that space. Okay, so when you're cutting these spacer boards, make sure you cut the header, which goes at the top, to be exactly as long as the pegboard. Same thing with the footer. Okay, and then we're going to put 3 in the middle. And these will be exactly as long as the edge of the header to the edge of the footer. So we're going to put 1 on this end, 1 on this end, and 1 in the center. Okay, the other thing I'm going to do, and this is optional, I'm going to paint all of these black. And here's why. I want to obscure them so I don't see the wood through the holes of the pegboard. Also, there's going to be an exposed edge on the sides of where this is going. And I want the edges to blend in with the color scheme of my gem. All right, let's paint. All right, the paint is now dry and they came out looking fantastic. So now let's talk about the color of the pegboard itself. Now most pegboard is going to come in just plain white. However, if we want to get creative, well, we can get creative. All right, next step. Now we're going to use our stud finder and we're going to use this to mark the stud positions where we're hanging the pegboard. All right, next step. Now take your header and your footer spacer boards and overlay it on the stud position markings and then mark those stud positions onto your spacer boards. Now, if your pegboard holes are lined up with your stud positions, you can just run the screws through the pegboard, through the spacer board, and into the stud. Now, to determine if they're aligned, take your header or your footer spacer board and place it against your pegboard. This will determine if they're aligned or not. Mine are not aligned. Therefore, I need to affix the spacer boards to the studs before I hang up the pegboard. Now to do this, I'm going to be using a countersink drill bit and drill holes wherever the spacer boards align with the stud positions. These countersunk holes will prevent the heads of the screws from sticking out, leaving a nice flat surface for the pegboard to adhere to. Now repeat this for the rest of the spacer boards. All right, next step. Now I'm going to be using 2.5 inch long screws, and I'm going to fix all the spacer boards to the studs. All right, next step. Now we're gonna put the pegboard against the spacer boards, and we'll use the holes in the pegboard to identify the best placement for putting our screws in. And I'm gonna use it as a template to pre-drill, because if you don't, you risk splitting the wood when you drive these screws through. All right, next step. Now we're gonna run screws through the pegboard and through these spacer boards. And I'm gonna be using 2.5 inch long screws with finishing washers. All right, it's all done, and I think it looks awesome. So now we can hang our hooks and start hanging our gym equipment. Voila, all organized. All right, pegboard, a great addition to any home gym. Now for more details on this project, be sure to visit DIYFitnessClub.com. And if you need any of the supplies needed to execute today's project, please consider shopping for those products via the links down in the video description below. Shopping via these links costs you nothing extra, and it helps support the channel. All right, that does it for this project, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next project. So be sure to subscribe to the channel to be alerted the moment the next project drops.